You've just got off watching the latest trailer for Final Fantasy XIV 7.1, and it is absolutely packed with Final Fantasy XI references. You're probably the player who has no idea about Final Fantasy XI. Maybe you don't even know that it was the first MMO that Square Enix ever created. Well, this is the video for you.
It all began with a stone, or so the legend says.
Long before Final Fantasy XIV was ever reborn, I was beyond addicted to Final Fantasy XI. It was my very first MMO, and I would come home from school every single day to play this. It massively changed my life. Now, with Echos of Vana'diel coming to Final Fantasy XIV and knowing exactly what's in the patch trailer, I want to share that experience with you guys so you'll have the best time in the 24-man. Immediately as the trailer starts, you are blasted with nostalgia as a Final Fantasy XI player. This is the Vana'diel March, the signature title screen music that plays every single time you would log into FF11. It has been mashed up slightly with the Final Fantasy Prelude, but it's pretty much the same song. The first glimpse of an area that we see is the Grand Duchy of Juno. More specifically, this is Lower Juno. Sitting at the center of Vana'diel, Juno was the central hub for all players to converge onto once they had reached level 20. Players would have a journey ahead of them as they would have to reach here from their starting cities of Sandoria, Bastok, and Windhurst. Given that all paths lead to Juno and how iconic it is, it only makes sense that this is a starting point for the 24-man. One thing I'm speculating about the first shot of Juno in the trailer is it kind of looks like a hub of sorts. There's these shadowy figures in the background, and it appears like it's been restored back to normal. This could be a world tour of sorts to just put Vana'diel back together. What looks to be our first encounter with a main character from FF11 is Prish, the heroine of the Chains of Promethea expansion. Prish, as a character, is extremely boisterous and foul-mouthed. She doesn't care who she picks fights with, be it a great worm or god. Her appearance in the trailer is actually pretty striking. She doesn't normally wear an outfit like this. It's very magical girl-like, and it makes me think that she's either been taken over by someone, or maybe she's using this to test the warrior light. The next stop on our trip through Vana'diel is the Dragon's Arey. This small area may not seem like much, but it's actually one of the most notorious areas for endgame players. Instead of just dragonflies, imagine this room packed with hundreds upon hundreds of players, all trying to get their claim on two different dragons, Fafnir and Nidhogg. One of those names is already very familiar to many Final Fantasy XIV players, and the other lesser known appearing within Eureka Animos. Both of them were coveted by endgame players for their extremely rare loot table. But not only that, both of these dragons fell into two special categories, H&Ms and Ground Kings. H&Ms, or High Notorious Monsters, were in a league of their own. They're basically the equivalent of an open world raid boss. And the Ground Kings designation was also extremely important. Ground Kings only spawned every 21 to 24 hours, and only one of them could spawn within those 21 to 24 hours. And the more common one, Fafnir, would spawn 3 consecutive days before Nidhogg even had a chance at spawning. There is one more piece that makes these two even rarer. Only one party in Final Fantasy XI can claim any monster. That would mean that you are fighting with all these people. This is not like hunts or super fates from Final Fantasy XIV, where everyone has a chance at getting credit. No, no one can attack outside your party, and that's it. That's what made these things even rarer, besides just the 21 to 24 hour window. This resorted a lot of endgame players to using third-party programs to actually claim these monsters. Eventually, this led Square Enix to change how these monsters spawned. Instead, they're spawned from obtaining items from other pieces of content and trading it to a question mark in the center of the arena. It's a bit difficult to tell still which one is joining in on the 24-man raid, but they'll definitely be using their signature Hurricane Wing attack and Dragon Breath attack. Welcome to Tulia, one of the most recognizable Final Fantasy XI endgame areas. It was the end of your journey in the Rise of Zilart expansion. Tulia was a floating island that was created by the Zilart thousands of years before the game's setting and was often looked at as a gate to the gods. Also better known for its player-given name, Sky. Players would travel around Sky hunting down notorious monsters for items that would spawn the Sky Gods. FF14 players are probably already familiar with these gods if they have done the Four Lords questline: Byakko, Genbu, Siryu, and Suzaku, with the final god Kirin being able to be spawned by obtaining items from all 4 of the other gods. But there was one other purpose to Sky that we're missing. Apathy, cowardice, envy, arrogance, and rage. The sins of Vana'diel's races made manifest as the Archangels. The Archangel's fight, known as Divine Might, is often looked at as a milestone for many Final Fantasy XI players. Instead of fighting each Archangel individually, you had the option to fight them all together with an alliance of 18 players for a special earring that would be part of many endgame players' gear sets. When the 24-man alliance was announced, Divine Might was one of my first fights that I was hoping to be recreated in Final Fantasy XIV. One thing I was surprised about is the outfits that the Archangels wear will end up being the first sets of gear from the 24-man. This wasn't available in Final Fantasy XI until recently when SE added the set within the login campaign, which might have been a sign that it was coming to Final Fantasy XIV in the Alliance raid. Given their positioning in the trailer, it makes me think they'll end up being the 3rd fight of the 24-man. This diverges a bit from Final Fantasy XI as their story in Rise of Zilart begins where the base game's MSQ ends, leading to the final boss of the raid. The Shadow Lord, the main antagonist of Final Fantasy XI's original story, is the embodiment of anger and fury. On the adventure's final mission of the base game, they make their way to the snowy lands of Zarkabard to confront the Shadow Lord. Players would need to fight or sneak their way through an army of beastmen and demons to find him deep within Castles of All. After fighting through hordes of enemies and traversing the keep, they would find the final stage of this conflict within the throne room. And finally, a battle with the Shadow Lord himself at the end of the journey. He eventually falls and peace is once again restored to Vana'diel. The Shadow Lord, or various versions of him, are a recurring character throughout Final Fantasy XI endgame and story quests. Besides Sky, one of the most well-known endgame contents of the Rise of Zilart expansion is the 64-man raid Dynamis. Within the 6th zone of the original Dynamis Zarkabard, the Shadow Lord takes up the name Dynamis Lord as the final boss. Before modern-day Final Fantasy XI, this used to be a monumental task to overcome because gathering 50+ people to actually be able to take him down required a lot of coordination. Another version of the Shadow Lord that appears in Final Fantasy XI is from the Wings of the Goddess expansion. Without going into too many spoilers, during the Crystal War, the Shadow Lord led the Beastmen armies against the allied forces of Altana. For the main story of the Wings of the Goddess expansion, you finally get to experience the Crystal War firsthand. Within one of the scenes, the Shadow Lord himself takes to the battlefield to show why he's so feared. The armor he's wearing during the Crystal War looks to be what his second phase will be for the 24-man raid if you're looking at the trailer carefully. There is definitely more background to the Shadow Lord that I haven't went into yet in case there are any future Final Fantasy XI players because of the raid series. For example, the most recent set of missions, the Voracious Resurgence, heavily deals with him. I really enjoyed making this video. Honestly, it was like plucking memories from my head, going around Vana'diel in present day, and just experiencing all the things that I had in the past. I really hope this raid series gives some Final Fantasy XIV players a chance to go play Final Fantasy XI. I really think it would resonate with a lot of 14 players seeing kind of where Final Fantasy XIV came from in a lot of ways, because the ingredients of Final Fantasy XIV, at least in the MSQ, are definitely there in Final Fantasy XI. And that's it. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. If you could, leave a like or sub on the video, and you can also check me out at twitch.tv/KaiyokoStar. Later.